Once upon a time, hidden between green mountains and endless fields of wild flowers, there was a peaceful little village where everyone knew each other by name. In that village lived an old woman named Amara. Her hair was silver like moonlight, her hands were wrinkled from years of hard work, and her face carried the soft marks of both sorrow and wisdom. But the most beautiful thing about her was not her appearance. It was the calmness in her eyes. Even during difficult days, she smiled in a way that made people feel safe, as if no storm in the world could fully break her spirit. Amara lived alone in a tiny clay house beside a great banyan tree at the edge of the village. Her husband had died many years earlier, and she had never been blessed with children. Most people believed loneliness would have made her bitter, but instead it made her kinder. Every morning before sunrise, she swept the ground outside her home, watered the flowers near her doorway, and fed crumbs of bread to the birds that gathered around her feet. Then she would sit quietly beneath the banyan tree with a cup of warm tea and watch the village wake up around her. Life in the village was beautiful, but it was not easy. Farmers worked long hours beneath the burning sun and still worried whether rain would come in time for the harvest. Shopkeepers counted every coin carefully because one bad season could destroy their business. Families struggled with illness, debt, hunger, and uncertainty. Some nights the village looked peaceful from the outside, while inside many homes people cried silently over problems they could not solve. Yet, no matter how difficult life became, the villagers noticed something strange about Amara. She never let sadness stay in her heart for too long. When others complained about life, she listened patiently. When people lost hope, she somehow helped them breathe again. Nobody understood how a woman who had lost so much could still speak with such peace. Slowly, the villagers began visiting her beneath the banyan tree whenever life became too heavy to carry alone. One cold afternoon, a young woman named Radha came running toward Amara's house with tears pouring down her face. Her clothes were dusty, her hair messy, and her eyes swollen from many sleepless nights. Amara looked at her gently and immediately knew the girl had been carrying pain for a long time. Without asking questions, she invited Radha to sit beneath the tree and handed her a glass of cool water. For several minutes, Radha could not speak. Her chest rose and fell quickly as she tried to calm herself. Finally, she whispered, "Mother Amara, I am scared. My husband left for the city months ago to find work, but I have not heard from him in weeks. There is almost no food left in the house. My children ask me every night when their father will return, and I don't know what to tell them anymore." Amara listened carefully without interrupting her. She had learned long ago that broken hearts do not need quick answers. They need someone willing to sit beside their pain without rushing it away. After a moment, she softly asked, "Tell me, my child, what thoughts fill your mind every morning when you wake up?" Radha looked confused by the question. "Bad thoughts," she admitted quietly. "I think my husband may never come back. I think my children may suffer. I think life is becoming darker every day." As she spoke, fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "I try to stay strong, but my mind keeps imagining the worst." Amara nodded slowly and looked toward the mountains glowing beneath the evening sun. "The mind," she said gently, "is like a garden. Whatever you water every day will grow stronger. If you water fear, fear will take over your life. If you water hope, hope will slowly become stronger than fear." Radha shook her head sadly. "But how can I think positive thoughts when everything around me feels so difficult?" she asked. "People always say, 'Stay positive,' but they don't understand how painful life can become." Amara smiled softly because she understood that pain better than most people did. "Come closer," she said. "Let me tell you a story that changed my life many years ago." Radha wiped her tears and listened carefully as the old woman began speaking in her calm and steady voice. "Long ago," Amara said, "there lived a poor fisherman beside a wide river. He had no family, no savings, and almost no luck. Every day he worked from sunrise until darkness, but the river rarely gave him enough fish to survive comfortably. Slowly, bitterness entered his heart. He stopped noticing the beauty around him because all he could see was what he lacked. One evening, the fisherman sat beside the river crying. He looked at the sky and shouted, "Why has life forgotten me? Why does everyone else have happiness while I have nothing?" At that moment, an old traveler passed by and sat quietly beside him. The traveler asked, "Why are you crying so heavily?" The fisherman answered, "Because I have nothing left to hope for." The traveler remained silent for a moment before pointing toward the flowing river. "Do you see that water?" he asked. The fisherman nodded. Then the traveler pointed toward the orange sunset reflecting across the sky and said, "Do you see that beauty?" Again, the fisherman nodded. Finally, the traveler smiled and whispered, "Then life has not abandoned you yet. Your sadness has only made you blind to what still remains." The fisherman became angry at first because he believed the traveler did not understand his suffering. But later that night, while lying beside the river, he thought deeply about those words. He realized he had spent years focusing only on what was missing from his life. He had forgotten to notice what was still present. The next morning, something changed inside him. For the first time in years, he thanked the river before casting his net into the water. He smiled at strangers in the market instead of complaining. He began helping others even when he himself had very little. Slowly, his heart became lighter. And strangely, as his attitude changed, opportunities started appearing that he had never noticed before. Months later, the fisherman was no longer the miserable man who cried beside the river. He still faced problems. He still worked hard every day. But his heart had become peaceful because he stopped feeding hopelessness and started feeding gratitude. Amara looked into Radha's eyes and said softly, "The fisherman's life did not improve because of magic. It improved because his thinking changed. Positive thinking does not erase pain overnight, but it gives you strength to survive pain without losing yourself." Radha sat silently for a long time after hearing the story. Deep inside her heart, something began shifting. For months, she had been feeding fear every single day without realizing it. Her mind had become so focused on disaster that she could no longer see hope standing quietly beside her. "But what if bad things still happen?" she finally asked. "What if life truly becomes worse?" Amara smiled gently. "Bad things are part of life, my child. No person escapes suffering forever. But there is a difference between carrying pain and surrendering to it. Positive thinking does not promise a perfect life. It simply gives you the courage to continue walking even when the road becomes dark." That evening, Radha returned home feeling strangely lighter. Her problems had not disappeared, but something inside her mind had softened. Before sleeping, she sat beside her children and whispered quietly to herself, "Tomorrow can still become a good day." It felt unfamiliar because fear had become such a normal part of her life, but she repeated those words again and again until she finally fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, Radha woke before sunrise. Instead of lying in bed, drowning in worry, she cleaned the house, prepared food for her children, and stepped outside to greet the morning air. For the first time in many months, she noticed how beautiful the sunlight looked as it touched the village rooftops. She smiled softly without even realizing it. Days turned into weeks, and slowly Radha began changing. Whenever fearful thoughts entered her mind, she remembered Amara's words about the garden inside the heart. Instead of feeding fear all day, she forced herself to focus on small moments of gratitude. She became kinder with her children, stronger during difficult moments, and calmer whenever uncertainty appeared. One afternoon, while washing clothes outside her home, Radha saw a messenger walking toward her carrying a letter. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter was from her husband. He explained that work had been difficult to find at first, but he had finally secured a steady job in the city. Along with the letter was money for the family and a promise that he would return home soon. Radha burst into tears, but these tears were different. They were filled with relief, gratitude, and overwhelming joy. She immediately ran toward Amara's house beneath the banyan tree. The old woman was sitting peacefully in the shade when Radha arrived, breathless and smiling. "He found work," Radha cried happily. "My husband is safe and he sent money home." Her entire face glowed with relief as she spoke. Amara smiled warmly and nodded. "You see, my child," she whispered gently, "hope carried you through the darkness until light returned. If fear had controlled your heart completely, it would have destroyed your strength long before this moment arrived." Word about Amara's wisdom spread quickly through the village. Soon, people from every corner of the community began visiting her beneath the banyan tree. Some came carrying grief, while others came carrying anger, fear, loneliness, or hopelessness. Yet every person left feeling a little lighter than before. One day, a farmer named Dev visited her after losing most of his crops during a terrible drought. He sat heavily beneath the tree and sighed. "I worked harder this year than ever before, but I still failed. Maybe life simply wants me to suffer." Amara handed him a tiny flower seed from her garden and asked, "What happens if this seed believes the soil is too difficult and refuses to grow?" Dev looked confused before answering. "Then it will die." Amara nodded gently. "Exactly. Difficult conditions test whether something truly wants to live. Your hardship is not proof that life hates you. It is simply proof that life is asking whether you will continue growing despite the difficulty." Those words stayed in Dev's heart long after he returned home. Another villager named Sita came to Amara after losing her mother to illness. She was drowning in grief and barely spoke during their first meeting. Amara sat beside her silently for several minutes before softly saying, "Pain is like rain. You cannot stop it from falling, but you can decide whether it destroys your garden or helps something stronger grow." Little by little, the banyan tree became a place of healing for the entire village. Children sat there listening to stories while older villagers shared tea and life lessons beneath the evening sky. Travelers passing through often heard stories about the wise old woman who healed hearts with nothing but kindness and understanding. One evening, a curious little boy named Aaron asked Amara, "Grandmother, why do bad thoughts enter our minds so easily?" She smiled gently and pointed toward her small garden nearby. "Because weeds grow naturally," she explained. "Flowers require care. Fear enters the mind automatically, but peace must be practiced every day." Aaron thought carefully before asking, "Then how do we grow peace?" Amara looked at him lovingly and replied, "By protecting what enters your mind. Feed yourself gratitude instead of endless complaints. Feed yourself hope instead of constant fear. Speak kindly to yourself when life becomes difficult. The mind believes whatever you repeat to it every day." Years passed quietly through the village. Children became adults. Seasons changed, and new families were born. Yet Amara remained the peaceful heart of the village. Her tiny house beside the banyan tree became a symbol of hope for anyone struggling through hard times. One winter evening, as the sky turned orange with sunset, Radha sat beside Amara and softly asked, "After all these years, what is the greatest lesson life has taught you?" The old woman looked toward the glowing horizon for a long moment before answering. "Life will never become perfect," she whispered gently. "There will always be pain, disappointment, loss, and uncertainty. But happiness does not come from having a perfect life. It comes from choosing peace even when life is imperfect." Radha felt tears fill her eyes because she finally understood how deeply those simple lessons had changed her own life. Fear once controlled her completely, but hope had slowly rebuilt her from the inside. As darkness covered the village and lamps began glowing outside small homes, Amara closed her eyes peacefully beneath the banyan tree. She knew her life would not last forever, but she also knew something far more important. Kindness survives. Hope survives. The words we plant inside another person's heart continue growing long after we are gone. And from that day forward, the villagers taught their children the lesson Amara had shared for so many years. Protect your thoughts carefully because thoughts become feelings. Feelings become actions, and actions slowly become your life. Feed your mind with hope instead of fear. Choose gratitude instead of bitterness. Because positive thinking is not pretending life is easy. It is refusing to let darkness become stronger than your light.